The sun dipped low over the vast expanse of the desert, casting long shadows across the arid land. A widow sat alone on the porch of her small ranch house, her silhouette blending with the golden hues of dusk. Her name was Clara Bennett, and though she had once been a woman of means, life in the Wild West had taken its toll. Her husband, John, a hard-working rancher, had passed away unexpectedly, leaving behind nothing but debts and an empty heart. Until that moment, Clara believed herself to be penniless, her future as barren as the land stretching before her. But then, something extraordinary happened. As Clara gazed out into the distance, her eyes caught the faint outline of movement, a wild stallion galloping toward her property. Its mane flowed like fire in the fading light, and it carried something unusual, a saddlebag slung across its back. Little did she know, this unexpected visitor would change everything. The days leading up to that fateful evening had been filled with despair. The ranch, once bustling with cattle and laughter, now stood silent except for the wind whispering through the dry grass. Clara's hands trembled as she tried to mend yet another torn fence post, her strength waning with each passing day. She had sold most of their livestock to pay off creditors, but even then it hadn't been enough. The bank threatened foreclosure, and Clara found herself staring at the horizon every night, praying for some kind of miracle. The nights were colder than usual, and the stars seemed dimmer somehow. On one such night, Clara lay awake in her bed, listening to the howl of coyotes in the distance. Her mind raced with thoughts of what might come next. Would she lose the only home she and John had ever known? Would she have to leave the land where they had built their dreams together? And yet, despite her fears, there was a part of her that refused to give up hope entirely. There had to be a way out, a hidden path forward, perhaps buried deep within the challenges she faced. But until that moment, she couldn't see it. It was mid-afternoon when the stallion first appeared. Clara was sitting under the old oak tree near the water trough, trying to cool herself from the relentless heat. The air was thick with dust, and sweat trickled down her temples. Suddenly, she heard the distant sound of hooves pounding against the earth. At first, she thought it was just another stray horse wandering too close to her land, but as the creature came into view, Clara froze. This wasn't just any horse. It was magnificent. Its coat gleamed like polished mahogany, and its muscles rippled with power. What struck Clara most, however, was a saddlebag hanging loosely from its side. As the stallion approached, she noticed its wild eyes, filled with both caution and curiosity. For a moment, the two locked gazes, and Clara felt an inexplicable connection. "Who are you?" she murmured softly, more to herself than to the animal. The stallion snorted, pawing at the ground before coming to a stop a few feet away from her. Slowly, cautiously, Clara rose to her feet. She extended her hand, palm open, letting the horse sniff her fingers. To her surprise, it didn't shy away. Instead, it nudged her hand gently, almost as if seeking approval. Clara's heart raced. This was no ordinary horse. It carried secrets. She could feel it. And those secrets might just hold the key to her salvation. With trembling hands, Clara untied the saddlebag from the stallion's side. The leather creaked softly as she opened it, revealing its contents. Inside, she found a bundle of papers tied with a fraying string. Her brow furrowed as she carefully unwrapped them, revealing documents written in neat handwriting. Some were maps, others appeared to be letters. One letter, in particular, caught her attention. It bore the seal of a bank, dated several years prior. Clara's breath hitched as she read the words aloud. "To whom it may concern, enclosed herein is proof of ownership for the mineral rights beneath the Bennett Ranch. These rights were purchased by John Bennett in good faith, but remain unclaimed due to oversight. Should this document fall into the hands of his rightful heir, please honor the claim accordingly." Her hand shook violently as she reread the letter. Mineral rights? Beneath her land? Could it be true? Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized the implications. If what the letter said was accurate, then the land she thought worthless might actually contain riches beyond her wildest dreams. But then doubt crept in. How could such a thing exist without her knowledge? Why hadn't John mentioned it? And why, after all these years, had no one else discovered it? Little did she know, The answers to these questions were far more complex and dangerous than she could have imagined. That night, Clara lit a lantern and spread the documents across her kitchen table. The flickering light cast dancing shadows on the walls, adding to the eerie atmosphere. She studied the maps meticulously, tracing lines and symbols with her finger. Each map depicted different sections of her land, marked with X's and circles. One area, in particular, stood out, a patch of land near the riverbank, where the terrain dropped sharply into a rocky ravine. Could this be where the minerals were located? Clara's heart pounded with excitement and trepidation. She knew she needed help verifying claims, but who could she trust? Most of the townsfolk had turned their backs on her since John's death, viewing her as a failure or worse, a burden. Still, she resolved to act quickly. Time was running out. The bank wouldn't wait forever. With renewed determination, Clara folded the documents and placed them safely inside a wooden box. Tomorrow, she decided, she would venture into town and seek advice from someone reliable. Dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange. Clara saddled her own horse, a gentle mare named Daisy, and set off toward the nearest town. The journey took several hours, during which Clara couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every call of a crow made her turn her head, half expecting to see someone or something following her. When she finally arrived in town, the streets were alive with activity. Merchants hawked their wares. Children played in the dirt, and horses tethered to posts stamped impatiently. Claire dismounted and led Daisy to the livery stable, where she entrusted the mare to the care of the stable hand. Then she walked briskly toward the general store, her destination for the day. Inside, the scent of coffee and freshly baked bread mingled with the aroma of leather and tobacco. Clara approached the counter, where an elderly man with a bushy mustache greeted her warmly. "Morning, Miss Bennet," he said, tipping his hat. "What can I do for you today?" "I need your help," Clara replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I've come across some interesting documents about my land. I'd like to know if they're legitimate." The man raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Documents, you say? Let me take a look." Clara retrieved the papers from her satchel and handed them over. The man examined them carefully, muttering to himself as he traced the lines on the maps. Finally, he looked up, his expression grave. "These look genuine enough," he admitted, "but I ain't no expert. You might want to consult Mr. Thompson at the law office. He'll know for sure." Clara thanked him and left the store, heading straight for the law office. Along the way, she noticed several men watching her from the corners of their eyes. Their stares made her uneasy, but she pressed on, determined not to let fear deter her. Mr. Thompson proved to be a meticulous man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose. After reviewing the documents, he confirmed their authenticity. "This is quite remarkable, Miss Bennet," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Your late husband appears to have acquired significant mineral rights. However, claiming them won't be easy. There will likely be opposition from parties interested in exploiting the resources themselves." Clara nodded grimly. "What should I do?" "First, we file the claim officially," Thompson explained. "Then, we investigate further. We'll need evidence confirming the presence of valuable minerals on your land." Relieved but wary, Clara agreed to proceed. Together, they drafted the necessary paperwork and submitted it to the authorities. Within days, word spread throughout the region about the potential wealth hidden beneath the Bennett Ranch. Speculators began circling like vultures, eager to stake their claims. One evening, as Clara returned home, she spotted a group of men loitering near her property line. They wore rough clothing and carried rifles slung over their shoulders. Fear gripped her throat as she realized they weren't friendly visitors. "What do you think you're doing here?" she demanded, reining in her horse. The leader, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, sneered at her. "We're here to make sure you don't get greedy, missy. That land belongs to everyone, not just you." Clara's resolve hardened. "It's mine by law. Stay off my property or I'll call the sheriff." The man laughed cruelly. "Sheriff? He owes us favors. Don't count on him helping you." Threatened but unwilling to back down, Clara rode past him, locking herself inside her house. That night, she barely slept, constantly checking the windows for signs of trouble. By morning, the men were gone, but Clara knew they wouldn't stay away for long. Days turned into weeks as Clara awaited confirmation of her claim. During this time, strange occurrences plagued her ranch. Fence posts were cut down, tools went missing, and one night, a fire broke out in the barn. Though extinguished quickly, the damage was clear. Someone wanted her to abandon her efforts. Yet, Clara persevered. She hired a geologist to survey her land, hoping to uncover definitive proof of the mineral's existence. When the results came back positive, indicating substantial deposits of gold and silver, Clara felt a surge of triumph. Her struggles were paying off. At least, they would once the authorities approve her claim. But then, an unforeseen twist emerged. On the final day of waiting, Clara received a visit from an unexpected guest. An older man, dressed plainly but carrying an aura of authority, introduced himself as Daniel Hayes, a former partner of John Bennett. He claimed to have information crucial to Clara's case. "You see," Hayes explained, "John didn't acquire those mineral rights alone. We worked together, pooling our resources. Unfortunately, disagreements arose, and we parted ways before fully resolving matters. Now, I'm here to ensure justice is served, for both of us." Clara listened intently, her mind racing. Was Hayes telling the truth, or was he merely another opportunist trying to exploit her situation? "Prove it," she challenged. Hayes produced additional documents, corroborating his story. Reluctantly, Clara agreed to share the profits equally, provided Hayes assisted in defending their claim against rival interests. Together, they formed an alliance, combining their strength to protect what rightfully belonged to them. Through perseverance, courage, and a little help from a mysterious wild stallion, Clara Bennett reclaimed her dignity and secured a brighter future for herself and her family. And so, the tale of the penniless widow ended not with defeat, but with victory, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity and tension. Clara and Daniel Hayes worked tirelessly to fortify their claim, knowing full well that the eyes of many hungry prospectors were set on the Bennett Ranch. The once quiet stretch of land now buzzed with whispers of gold and silver, drawing in those who sought fortune at any cost. Clara's heart was heavy with the weight of responsibility, but her spirit remained unyielding. Under the blazing sun, Clara rode alongside Daniel as they patrolled the perimeter of the ranch. The air was thick with dust, kicked up by their horses' hooves, and the horizon stretched endlessly before them. It was during one such ride that Clara spotted something unusual, a faint glimmer buried beneath the dry earth near the riverbank. Her pulse quickened as she dismounted, brushing away the dirt to reveal a small vein of shimmering silver. "This is it," Daniel murmured, his voice tinged with awe. "This proves everything." Clara nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she traced the cool metal. It was undeniable evidence of the wealth hidden beneath her land, but it also marked the beginning of a new challenge. Word spread fast, and soon, strangers began appearing on the outskirts of the ranch. Miners, speculators, and men with questionable intentions. Clara knew she couldn't face them alone. One evening, as the sky burned with hues of orange and purple, Clara sat by the fire outside her cabin. The flames crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on her face. She held the saddlebag from the wild stallion close to her chest, its contents now more precious than ever. It was then that she made a decision, one that would alter the course of her life forever. "I need allies," she whispered to herself, her resolve hardening. Daniel had introduced her to a few trustworthy individuals in town. Samuels, the blacksmith, whose sturdy arms could wield both hammer and rifle. Martha, the baker, whose sharp mind often outmatched the cunning schemes of others. And Sheriff Miller, a man of integrity, despite his weariness toward the chaos brought by the mineral rush. Together, they formed an unlikely coalition, united by a common goal, to protect what belonged to Clara. But not everyone shared their vision. A group of ruthless miners, led by a man named Ezekiel Cross, saw the Bennett Ranch as nothing more than a prize to be taken. Cross was a tall, imposing figure with cold eyes that seemed to pierce through anyone he looked at. He arrived one morning, accompanied by a band of armed men, demanding immediate access to the land. "You can't keep this all to yourself, widow," Cross sneered, leaning casually against his horse's saddle. "Share or surrender, it's your choice." Clara stood her ground, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "This land is mine. If you want it, you'll have to fight for it." Cross laughed, a sound like gravel being crushed underfoot. "Oh, we will, little lady. We most certainly will." The confrontation escalated quickly. Clara and her allies prepared defenses around the ranch, using every resource available. Barbed wire was strung across key points, makeshift barricades erected, and old rifles polished until they gleamed. Each member of the group brought something unique to the table. Samuel's strength, Martha's strategy, Sheriff Miller's authority. But even together, they were outnumbered. On the night of the showdown, the moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie silhouettes over the landscape. Cross and his men approached under cover of darkness, their torches lighting up the night like fireflies gone mad. Clara positioned herself atop the hill overlooking the property, her rifle steady in her hands. "Remember why we're doing this," she called out to her companions, her voice cutting through the tension. "We're fighting for what's right, for what's ours." As the battle commenced, chaos erupted. Gunshots echoed across the plains, mingling with shouts and the thunderous stomping of hooves. Clara fought with precision and determination, each shot fired with purpose. Despite their courage, the odds seemed insurmountable. One by one, her allies fell back, either injured or overwhelmed. But then, something miraculous happened. From the distance, a familiar figure emerged, a wild stallion, galloping toward the scene with unmatched speed and grace. On its back sat none other than Daniel Hayes, who had slipped away earlier to rally reinforcements. Behind him rode a group of local farmers and townsfolk, armed and ready to defend the ranch. The sight invigorated Clara, and with renewed vigor, she charged forward, her rifle blazing. The tide turned swiftly, Cross's men retreating in disarray as they realized they were outmatched. In the end, Cross himself was captured, his arrogance shattered by the reality of defeat. In the aftermath, Clara surveyed the damage done to her land. Fences were broken, fields trampled, and scars left behind by the conflict. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was hope. The mineral rights were officially recognized, and Clara vowed to use the newfound wealth wisely, not just for herself, but for the community that had stood by her side. As she stood on the porch of her cabin, watching the sunrise paint the desert in vibrant colors, Clara felt a profound sense of peace. The wild stallion, having played such a pivotal role in her journey, returned one final time, gazing at her with knowing eyes before disappearing into the horizon. Little did Clara know, however, that this was only the beginning of her adventures in the untamed West. For in a world defined by struggle and resilience, she had proven herself to be a force to be reckoned with, a true daughter of the frontier. And as the winds carried her story far and wide, it became clear that the legend of the penniless widow who tamed the wild would endure for generations to come. The weeks that followed the battle against Ezekiel Cross were a time of rebuilding and reflection for Clara Bennett. Though victorious, her ranch bore the scars of the conflict. Fences torn down, barn doors splintered, and fields left in disarray. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was an undeniable sense of renewal. The once desolate land now carried the promise of prosperity, thanks to the mineral riches buried beneath its surface. Clara worked tirelessly alongside her newfound allies to restore the ranch to its former glory. Samuels repaired the broken fences with his calloused hands, while Martha organized the townsfolk into volunteer groups to assist in the cleanup efforts. Even Sheriff Miller lent a hand, though his primary focus remained maintaining order in the surrounding area, ensuring no further troublemakers dared encroach upon Clara's property. But peace, as they say, is often fleeting in the Wild West. One evening, as Clara sat by the fire, poring over the maps that had brought her so much strife and triumph, a peculiar sound caught her attention, a low whinny, followed by the soft crunch of hooves on gravel. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the unmistakable silhouette of the wild stallion that had first appeared during her darkest hour. This time, however, the stallion wasn't alone. Trailing behind him was another horse, smaller and more docile, carrying a rider cloaked in shadows. As the pair approached, Clara squinted into the dim light, trying to make out the figure atop the second horse. When the rider finally dismounted, Clara gasped. It was a young boy, no older than 12, with wide eyes full of fear and determination. "Ma'am," the boy stammered, his voice trembling but resolute. I need your help." Clara rose to her feet, her instincts kicking in. "What's wrong? Who are you?" "My name's Tommy," he replied, clutching a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I've been running for days. They're after me, the men who work for Cross. He didn't die in the fight, like everyone thinks. He escaped, and now he's gathering a new crew. They're coming back, ma'am. And this time, they won't stop until they take everything." Clara's blood ran cold. Cross alive? Returning with vengeance burning in his heart? It seemed impossible, yet the look in Tommy's eyes told her it was all too real. "What do you have there?" Clara asked, gesturing to the bundle in the boy's arms. Tommy hesitated before unwrapping the cloth, revealing a collection of papers and diagrams. "These belong to my father. He was one of Cross's men, but he realized how evil Cross truly was. Before he could escape, Cross killed him. These documents show where Cross plans to strike next, not just your ranch, but others too. If you don't stop him, hundreds of people will suffer." Clara scanned the documents, her mind racing. The information was damning. Proof of Cross's intentions and the locations he intended to target. But acting on it meant putting herself and those she cared about directly in harm's way. "You can trust me," Tommy pleaded, tears welling up in his eyes. "Please, ma'am. You're the only one who can stop him." Clara knelt beside the boy, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I'll do everything I can, Tommy, but we can't face Cross alone. We'll need help." Word spread quickly through the town about Cross's survival and his impending attack. Fear gripped the community, but Clara refused to let panic take hold. Instead, she called a meeting at the local saloon, gathering not only her closest allies, but also anyone willing to stand against Cross's tyranny. Sheriff Miller stood at the front of the room, his badge gleaming under the flickering lantern light. "If what Tommy says is true, and I believe it is, then we're facing more than just a band of outlaws. This is war, folks. A war for our homes, our families, and our futures." Martha stepped forward, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We may not be soldiers, but we know this land better than anyone. We can use that to our advantage. Let them come. We'll be ready." Samuels nodded in agreement. "And if they think they can scare us off with brute force, they've got another thing coming. Every fence post, every rock, every tree will turn this place into a fortress." Inspired by their resolve, Clara outlined a plan. Using the knowledge gained from Tommy's documents, they would set traps along Cross's likely routes, cutting off his supply lines and forcing him to reveal himself prematurely. Meanwhile, a group of scouts led by Daniel Hayes would track Cross's movements, providing crucial updates on his whereabouts. It was risky, but it was their best chance. Days turned into nights as the preparations intensified. Clara spent countless hours perfecting the defenses, her hands blistered from labor but her spirit undiminished. One night, as she rested briefly inside her cabin, the wild stallion appeared again, standing silently outside her window. Its presence seemed to offer comfort, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there was always hope. When the day of reckoning finally arrived, Clara and her allies took their positions, hearts pounding with anticipation. The sky above was heavy with storm clouds, lightning illuminating the distant horizon, as if nature itself braced for the clash to come. Cross and his men emerged late in the afternoon, riding hard and fast, their faces masked with rage and greed. Clara watched from her vantage point, her rifle steady in her hands. As the first wave of attackers charged toward the ranch, the carefully laid traps sprang into action. Ropes tripped horses, pitfalls swallowed riders, and strategically placed explosives sent shock waves rippling across the battlefield. But Cross was cunning. He adapted quickly, ordering his men to regroup and flank the defenders from both sides. Clara's heart raced as she realized the battle was far from over. In the heat of the fight, Clara found herself face to face with Cross. His scarred cheek twisted into a snarl as he raised his revolver, aiming straight at her chest. For a moment, time seemed to freeze, the world around them fading into silence. "You should have stayed penniless, widow," Cross growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he could pull it, a blur of motion intercepted him. The wild stallion, rearing up with a deafening neigh, striking Cross's arm with its powerful hooves. The gun clattered to the ground as Cross stumbled backward, momentarily stunned. Seizing the opportunity, Clara fired, her shot hitting Cross squarely in the leg. He cried out in pain, collapsing to the dirt. His men, seeing their leader incapacitated, began to falter, some surrendering while others fled into the wilderness. As the dust settled, Clara stood over Cross, her rifle pointed at his head. "You're finished, Cross. This land belongs to those who respect it, not destroy it." Defeated and bleeding, Cross spat at her feet. "This isn't over, Bennett. Mark my words." Clara smiled grimly. "Oh, it is?" With Cross captured and his operation dismantled, the threat to the Bennett Ranch and surrounding region was neutralized. Clara's reputation as a formidable force in the Wild West grew, her story inspiring others to stand up against injustice and tyranny. Yet, even as celebrations erupted throughout the town, Clara knew her journey was far from complete. The Wild West was a land of endless possibilities and challenges, and she was determined to meet each one head-on. As she watched the sun rise over the horizon, casting golden light across the rolling plains, Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the land she had fought so hard to protect, but for the friends and allies who had stood by her side. Together, they had proven that even in the harshest of environments, courage and resilience could prevail. And so, the legend of Clara Bennett continued to grow, her name whispered with awe and admiration by all who heard it. She was no longer just a widow. She was a symbol of hope and strength in a world defined by chaos and change. The days following the defeat of Ezekiel Cross were a mixture of relief and vigilance. Clara Bennett, though victorious, understood that the Wild West was never truly tamed. Peace could be fleeting, and danger often lurked just beyond the horizon. Yet, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. The ranch slowly came back to life under Clara's care. The fields, once trampled by the boots of Cross's men, began to heal with the help of the townsfolk who had rallied to her side. Samuels worked tirelessly to rebuild the fences, his hammer ringing out like a song of renewal. Martha organized community efforts to replant crops and restore the barn, ensuring no one went hungry during the recovery. Even Sheriff Miller, despite his usual stoic demeanor, found himself smiling more often as he patrolled the now peaceful land. But amidst the rebuilding, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something unresolved, something hidden beneath the surface, waiting to resurface. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, Clara sat on her porch, gazing at the stars scattered like diamonds above. The wild stallion appeared again, this time accompanied by Tommy, the boy who had brought her the critical documents about Cross's plans. They approached cautiously, the boy clutching a small satchel. "Ma'am," Tommy began, his voice steady but tinged with urgency, "there's something else you need to know." Clara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What is it, Tommy?" Tommy hesitated, glancing nervously at the stallion, before continuing. "These papers, they weren't just about Cross's plans. My father uncovered something much bigger, a secret that could change everything around here." Clara took the satchel from him, her heart quickening as she opened it. Inside were more documents, some older and yellow with age. Maps, letters, and diagrams filled the pages, each one revealing fragments of a story far larger than Clara had anticipated. "These maps show ancient trails," Tommy explained, pointing to one of the drawings. "Trails that lead to places. Well, places people don't talk about anymore. My father believed Cross wasn't after just gold or silver. He thought there was something else buried deep in these lands, something valuable enough to make men do terrible things." Clara studied the maps carefully, her mind racing. Some of the markings seemed familiar, echoing the layout of her own property. Others pointed to distant regions, areas she had never explored. One map, however, caught her attention immediately. It depicted a cave system near the riverbank, not far from where she had discovered the vein of silver. "What do you think is down there?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tommy shook his head. "I don't know, ma'am, but my father said it was worth dying for. And if Cross finds out about this—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Clara understood the weight of his words. Whatever lay hidden within those caves, it was dangerous and powerful enough to draw the attention of men like Cross. Determined to uncover the truth, Clara gathered her allies once more. This time, their mission wasn't just to defend their land. It was to explore the unknown. Armed with lanterns, ropes, and supplies, they ventured toward the riverbank under the cover of night, the wild stallion leading the way as if guiding them to a destination only it knew. The entrance to the cave system was concealed behind a curtain of vines, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Clara pushed aside the foliage, revealing a dark opening that seemed to swallow the light around it. A chill ran down her spine as she stepped inside, the air growing cooler and heavier with each step. The cave walls were lined with strange carvings, symbols that told stories of a time long forgotten. Daniel Hayes, ever the scholar, examined them closely, muttering to himself as he pieced together their meaning. "These aren't just random marks," he said finally. "They're warnings about something buried deeper within the earth." As they ventured further into the labyrinthine tunnels, the group encountered obstacles, narrow passages, steep drops, and even signs of previous explorers who hadn't made out alive. Clara pressed on, driven by a mix of curiosity and caution. She couldn't afford to ignore what might lie ahead, not when it could impact not only her life but the lives of everyone she cared about. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a chamber unlike any other. The room was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness, and at its center stood a pedestal carved from stone. On top of the pedestal rested a chest, its metal surface tarnished but unmistakably ornate. "This must be it," Clara whispered, her hand hovering over the latch. But before she could open it, Daniel placed a restraining hand on her shoulder. "Wait, we don't know what we're dealing with here. These carvings, they speak of power, yes, but also destruction. Whatever's inside, it might not be meant for us." Clara hesitated, her fingers trembling as she considered his words. Yet she knew she couldn't leave without understanding. With a deep breath, she lifted the lid. Inside the chest was a collection of artifacts, jewelry, weapons, and scrolls inscribed with intricate designs. But most striking of all was a small crystal, glowing faintly with an inner light. As Clara picked it up, the air around her seemed to shift, the temperature dropping suddenly. "What is it?" Martha asked, her voice tight with apprehension. I'm not sure," Clara replied, her gaze fixed on the crystal. "But it feels alive." Unbeknownst to Clara, the act of opening the chest had set off a chain reaction. Somewhere in the distance, a shadow stirred. An entity awakened from centuries of slumber, drawn by the disturbance caused by human hands meddling in forces beyond their comprehension. Its presence rippled through the earth, sending tremors through the cave walls and causing the stalactites above to groan ominously. Clara and her companions fled the chamber, their hearts pounding as the ground began to quake beneath their feet. The wild stallion reared up, neighing loudly, as if warning them of the danger yet to come. Just as they emerged from the cave, a massive boulder crashed down behind them, sealing the entrance and trapping whatever remained inside. Breathing heavily, Clara looked at the others, her mind racing. "We've done something incredible, and possibly catastrophic." Daniel nodded grimly. Whatever that crystal was, it wasn't meant to be disturbed. If whatever guards it breaks free. He trailed off, leaving the implications hanging in the air. For now, the immediate threat had passed, but Clara knew this was far from over. The secrets buried beneath the earth demanded answers, and perhaps sacrifices, that none of them were fully prepared for. Back at the ranch, Clara spent countless nights studying the artifacts, trying to decipher their purpose. The crystal, in particular, fascinated her, its glow pulsing softly as if responding to her touch. Yet, every time she held it, she felt a strange pull, a call that seemed to emanate from deep within the earth itself. Meanwhile, rumors began to spread throughout the region, whispers of strange occurrences, sightings of lights in the sky, and unexplained phenomena. Some dismissed them as superstition, while others spoke an awakening, a force stirring the Wild West that defied explanation. Clara realized that her journey was far from over. The fight against Cross had been merely the beginning. Now, she faced a new challenge, one that transcended the boundaries of man and nature, of known and unknown. And as the winds carried her story farther and farther, it became clear that Clara Bennett was destined for greatness, whether she sought it or not. In the end, the legend of the penniless widow would grow not only because of her courage and resilience, but because of her willingness to confront mysteries that others dared not face. For in a Wild West where danger and opportunity coexisted in equal measure, Clara Bennett stood as a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit could shine brightly enough to illuminate the path forward.